And that is correct, friends. On a Wednesday, we said we're going to come back in, probably start to ramp up our coverage a little bit here over the course of free agency. As always, Adam Marnbrecht, joined by the healthy, wealthy, and wise Andy Makowitz. How are we on a rainy Wednesday? You ruined the weather, just to be clear. You really messed that up for us.
I mean, there's always a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Happy St. Patrick's Day, Adam.
God, what a miserable thing to bring up during a circumstance when it's just not the same as it used to be. I'd be taking off today because I'm Irish. That's right. It's a holiday for me. I'd be probably, going out some local spots that I like to go and grab a couple of drinks and some food and like that. And actually, and one of my favorite spots to go to just got shut down from a COVID-19 outbreak as of yesterday. So it was a real gut punch when I thought maybe I'd do some takeout. So again, thanks for the lemon in the cut. We have a lot to get into. We're going to cover some of the smaller signings that the Giants got obviously accomplished yesterday. We're going to touch on the Dalvin Tomlinson parting ways in free agency a little bit later on. And then I'll break down why fans are completely insane to be overreacting to the Devontae Booker signing. But obviously, the biggest piece of information, as Twitter was waiting with bated breath yesterday, Leonard Williams does re-sign with the Giants, a 3-year, $63 million deal, $45 million guaranteed. Comes with, I think, $21.5 million signing bonus as well, and reduces that cap hit down to $11 million. After everything that went on, there's a lot that happened here. Fans were clamoring for rescinding the franchise tag at one point, and you and I were talking in the background around, listen, you could paint, as I suggested, playing devil's advocate, you could paint a picture where you rescind the tag and look what we pivot to, Kenny Golladay or whatever, if you want to go down that road. But the lack of patience, I think, from the fan base was really coming to a boil before these numbers came out. And then all of a sudden, it wasn't as big as maybe we all feared it was going to be.
$21 million per year, Leonard Williams, 3 years, get him for the next 3 years before he turns 30 years old. We're getting the prime years of Leonard Williams' career for $21 million. And I think there's a lot of things to unpack here with the Leonard Williams deal, but the few things that come to mind for me is, one, $11 million cap hit. They were able to work out the deal. They gave him a couple million more on an average per salary than the franchise tag was, but we were able to free up a bunch of cap space to go make some smaller signings. It gave us a little bit of room and flexibility, which is great. And for all the fans that were really upset, like, this deal is pretty reasonable for the Giants. Like, they got, to me, a top 10 defensive player in the league at just about $20 million a year during the prime of his career to anchor your defense. So for me, I am very happy with this. They could have made it a 5-year deal for $100-something million and made the last 2 years some ridiculous number that's voidable to make it have some nice window dressing like some of these other players have signed for. But really, I anticipate Leonard Williams being around for this entire contract. And that's, uncommon today in the practice of giving out these 4- and 5-year deals to other people.
In the model of Dave Gettleman, listen, it's a 3-year deal, and this is the average salary, and we don't have to move beyond, all those things that we highlighted last time around.
He stuck to his guns. He stuck to his guns on that, and it's actually true. Like, 3 years, 63. I'm like, that's pretty transparent. The first 2 years are basically guaranteed. Like, the whole thing is a pretty straightforward deal, which makes me wonder why there was so much back and forth over the last couple of days about, like, rescind the tag. Will he sign? Why is he being selfish? What's going on? And when in fact it's like, this deal, like, how far off could they really have been? Once you franchise tag Leonard Williams, like, this is the amount of money that he's going to ask for, right?
Well, yeah, a couple of the things that I think I wonder if they played a factor was that I wonder where the number starting point was for the Giants. And as you said, see, the market starts to play itself out, and you look around and you go, boy, some of these numbers are a little bit lower than maybe we thought for some of the guys in and around this position. So maybe a little commitment remorse from the Giants that now you've set the floor. But you had to have known going in, right? Once you do the franchise tag, you're saying, well, Leonard Williams, worst case scenario, you can sit on the tag for a year and make $19.4 million. So you know that Leonard Williams isn't going to come down from that. To quickly shoot down an idea that a lot of fans were saying, well, then let him go to free agency and let him see what the market looks like. I said it over on Twitter. If you had rescinded the tag and put him in the free agency market, you could choose to do that, but you have to accept that he wasn't coming back then. Like that, he would
Right.
not be coming back. He's not going out to the market saying, well, here's what I got. These are what the numbers. No, no, no. He's going somewhere else, and some other team in a win now mode would be willing to throw him a little bit of money, even if it had been a really big number for a 1 year, reset the value market for yourself and come back in next year. That's the one little side piece. The other thing that I think probably maybe was holding it up, right? One probably likes the idea of being able to get back out on the market where he's 30 and reset it again for himself, which is a nice opportunity to be able to have, so he can go back and make himself another substantial payday, probably at 29 going on 30 years old. So maybe the Giants wouldn't have hated having an extra year in there potentially. So I think it probably came down to that in a lot of ways. And then also, how are we structuring the guaranteed money where you'll still allow us to get it down to 11 million this year and, give you that 45 million guaranteed, give you the big signing bonus number as well. So there's a lot of nuts and bolts. Do I wish it had happened sooner? Sure. But as we're going to get into in a second, there were some other things that were happening as the legal tampering period started that indicated the Giants weren't feeling restricted by this anyway.
Yeah. I mean, the most frustrating part for all Giant fans was they felt like there was a bunch of reasonable contracts being put out there for players the Giants had interest in a couple years ago, off seasons, different things. You got a guy like Yannick Ngakoue. He was a guy that we thought could get $15, $18 million as a premier pass rusher in his mid-20s. He signed a 2-year, $13 million annual deal. Like, that's really reasonable to me for a pass rusher in his prime. 2-year deal. So you see these different deals flying off the board, and you're wondering, man, I wish the Giants had some cap space available to be a player in some of these different ones. But to your point, it seems like they were a player in things anyway. We talk about some of the different swings and misses the Giants had, or how much interest they had. They were close on one premier pass rusher at a young age in Leonard Floyd. And, obviously, the Giants couldn't make that work. But it is crazy to see all these reasonable deals. You never say that in an NFL offseason. You're like, how on earth is that guy getting $20 million? And now it was like, wow, a 2-year, $10 million annual deal for a guy that's an upper echelon starter. Like, that seems to be money well spent, and will look even better once the cap goes up considerably next year. That year 2 or year 3 of these deals is going to look like table stakes.
Yeah, and it's very interesting too, because a lot of 2- and 3-year contracts, right? Like, and we'll touch on here. Dalvin Tomlinson ends up going to the Vikings on a 2-year, $22 million, $16 million in the first year. A lot of guaranteed dollars for him. Again, to be able to reset the market. It seems like a lot of these guys may be looking to accomplish that, right? Shorter than longer. Not a lot of these long deals being given out. So that even a guy I mentioned when we were having this discussion on social media, Shaquille Griffin, right? He's 25. He signed a 3-year deal. So he'll be right back on the market as a premier outside corner, able to, again, cash in. So it seems like that's the structure of it. The Dalvin Tomlinson piece in this to me, and we can mention Leonard Floyd, that was the big name that the Giants seemed pretty committed on, didn't end up working out because ultimately he goes back on a restructure and they make the money work. For a team almost $50 million over the cap, the Rams are still able to make some things happen there. But Dalvin Tomlinson, I think what I came to realize was, for all of the talk about what he could mean to this team and both sides liking it, I have to think, based on the fact that the Giants were in discussions on a Leonard Floyd, apparently they were also at least looking around at Hunter Henry, which is interesting to say the least. I don't think either side really planned on coming back. I don't think the Giants planned on bringing Dalvin Tomlinson back. I don't think Dalvin Tomlinson anticipated being back, because it seems like they both walked into this feeling that way. And if we want to just cast our minds back, it would bring into question if you either didn't plan on or thought it was highly unlikely that you would be bringing Dalvin Tomlinson back. I can go back to last year and say he's a guy you probably should have considered moving then at 27 years old to a team. The Green Bay Packers were in the market and made a call about him last year. The Giants turned it down.
There are a couple things. One, so far, admittedly, as frustrating as it is, this offseason has played out exactly how I expected the Giants to play this out. I thought they would get a long-term deal done with Leonard Williams. I said, unfortunately, I think we're just not going to have the money to sign Dalvin Tomlinson, even though I'd love to bring him back. I thought we would release Kevin Zeitler, and I thought Solder would actually be part of the plan. And literally, that's how this has played out. When you think about the dead cap hits, you think about the different players that we have in our system to try to replace someone like Dalvin Tomlinson. The writing was on the wall early on. And, when they give Austin Johnson a guaranteed contract, 3 years per year annually, that was immediately the situation where the Giants end up turning around saying, yeah, we have BJ Hill, we've got Austin Johnson, we can, rub these two nickels together and hopefully make close to $1, which is what Dalvin Tomlinson is. And so, with the cap the way it is, the Giants had to make tough decisions. They wanted Leonard Williams. They realized that Dalvin Tomlinson was going to be a casualty, especially because we still have all these other holes on our roster that we're trying to fill.
Yeah, and maybe you and I think when we talked about it the last couple of weeks, we got swept up in a little bit. Jordan Renan saying it's possible. Maybe it still is. We don't know, right? We don't make ourselves out to be cap experts here. That you can move the money, you can restructure, you can create space to get multiple big names, including Leonard Williams. Bringing him back, you could still go after Kenny Golladay if you choose to. That may be the case. But our initial thought was I wouldn't be surprised if this is a fairly conservative offseason for the Giants and they just look to incrementally move themselves forward. And it does bring to mind the ideas. We're going to get into a couple of these smaller signings that the mentality of winning while rebuilding is a bad approach. I think everyone generally agrees with that, right? Gettleman, it's a mistake to make that statement. And yet this would fall in line with the rebuilding part of it, right? The Giants are not overcommitting to big money, big contracts. They are still looking at it and saying, we are probably a little ways away here. So maybe there isn't a reason to overextend ourselves, to overcommit to a Dalvin Tomlinson, who's 27, going to be 28 years old, and then say, right, but if we don't think we're there in the next 2-year window of real deep playoff run, it might not be worth it to give out that contract knowing what's coming down the road in a little bit.
Well, other piece of it is the Giants, were just outside the playoffs last year. They just missed it. They came down to beating Dallas, and then it came down to the Doug Peterson
put lipstick on a pig, friends?
Well, listen, I mean, going into the late afternoon game, the Giants were one game away from making the playoffs and making noise in the playoffs. Like while they did not reach the win total that you expect a playoff team to get to, they were, and that speaks to the division, and that's what I'm talking about, Adam.
Okay, and by the way, a Daniel Jones injury away from maybe the record looking different as well, right? Maybe they're 7-9, fighting for 8-8 potentially, as opposed to 6-10.
Right, and okay, let's go around the NFC East. What has Dallas done this offseason? Okay, they've given $40 million to their quarterback. They locked him in long term. Great, he's been around the last couple of years. Fine. Have they signed anybody else? Have they done anything to improve their team? Not really.
They have restructured their offensive line, so they've given themselves some flexibility there.
Yeah, but what have they done with that? They haven't done anything.
100%.
I'm saying, look at the players that were on the team. Look at the roster that they had. It has not improved. Look at the Eagles. Is it addition by subtraction? They got rid of Carson Wentz, which was supposed to be their franchise quarterback. They haven't really made any other moves. You look at the Washington football team. They signed Ryan Fitzpatrick. I'm going to sit here and say,
if I'm being honest,
I'm going to sit here and actually not be nervous or worried at all about Ryan Fitzpatrick, because he's never proven to be that guy that takes a team over the top and brings them to the playoffs. Is he a good quarterback? Sure. Am I more nervous about Alex Smith being back there than I am Ryan Fitzpatrick? Yes. And so the fact that they made this decision to say we're either going with Taylor Heineke or Ryan Fitzpatrick or both, we don't know, we'll figure it out. I'm not really too worried about the Washington football team. Their defense scares me. I think they've signed a cornerback from the Bengals that's really good. Their defense was amazing last year. But you look around the league, the Giants are like, how far off were we? We lost Saquon Barkley. Daniel Jones was hurt. Maybe we just need some small tweaks and we could still win this division.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And that's not, I mean, your point is well taken. By the way, go look at some Ryan Fitzpatrick stats as far as regular season quarterback. He's up there with some of the better quarterbacks in the league over the last handful of years. He's a good regular season quarterback. I think it's actually a good pickup for Washington. They may be right now, it still is probably Dallas based on talent, but then Washington could be a surging team. Eagles are a total question mark right now. But I don't want to get too lost in that. But your point is well taken that in general, the Giants felt pretty good about what they had done defensively last year. They feel like because of injuries, maybe the offense didn't get to showcase as much as they could have. So again, coming into this year 3 for Daniel Jones, it becomes important, and you should feel pretty positive on the general direction of the team. It's just this question mark of what is it going to be when it gets on the field. in that vein, so beyond Leonard Williams, now you look over, they bring back, as you mentioned, Austin Johnson. That's a nice little safety net. Remember, they still have BJ Hill there. Remember, they still technically have McIntosh there as well for whatever a fifth-round value is for you. So, like you said, rotation by committee, and we'll see what happens maybe in the draft. Another mid-round pick could help fill out that gap there left by Dalvin Tomlinson. They also signed John Ross. Feather in my cap. Mention this guy's name for a bit. I thought that this was exactly what I thought was going to happen for him. A 1-year, low-cost, prove-it deal to reset your market potentially. This feels like that Corey Coleman kind of take a flyer on a guy. I like the pickup. I think it brings that vertical speed and threat into the Giants wide receiver room. The only quick question here for that before we move on to the hot button issue that started the offseason for the Giants. Do you think that signing John Ross, it's not about the player that he is, but do you think that committing a little bit of money to the wide receiver room ahead of the draft, should that indicate that the Giants are not necessarily, even if they could make the money work, are not necessarily going to be in on a wide receiver in free agency?
I don't think signing John Ross prohibits anything from the wide receiver front.
Not prohibits, but more just that, do you think that the Giants are more likely, does that indicate that they're more likely to be waiting for the draft to get the big weapon as opposed to in free agency?
No, because there's still so many different holes that the Giants have not addressed yet across the entire team. One is edge rusher. Like, we were not very good at rushing the passer, and we have done nothing so far this offseason to address that. And a lot of these edge rushers like Matt Judon and others have come off the board. We mentioned Yannick Ngakoue. Fairly reasonable deals in my mind for a premier pass rusher. There's a handful of guys, Jadeveon Clowney, Justin Houston. There's some older guys, veteran guys that are out there that the Giants could make a decision on, or they could go edge rusher in the draft and say, we got to get younger at the edge position. We need some skill. I don't think signing John Ross really does anything to change the Giants' plan at all. I think Kenny Golladay, Curtis Samuel still are potentially being mentioned for the Giants. I don't think that signing John Ross prohibits another free agent splash, and I don't think it prohibits us from looking at if any of the wide receivers or Pitts drop to the Giants at 11 in the draft. I think all of these things are still on the board. Whether or not I like certain players more than another is another thing, but needing an edge rusher, needing a wide receiver, and needing a cornerback means the Giants still have to sort some stuff out in the draft early, as well as still pick up some of these veteran signings in free agency.
Yeah, nothing about the John Ross signing would tell me, and that's why you can bump wide receiver down the list of needs, or
we don't need Kenny Golladay or Jalen Waddle because we got John Ross. It's not something that Gettleman is saying to right. The rest of the
100%. But what we will get into in a minute here is going to be, though, because I sent you a text I sent you a text yesterday and you replied with with a question mark, and I forgot to follow up. I forgot to explain to you what I meant. So, and it's actually, I think it's worth mentioning because it is about what do the Giants need to do, maybe if they can make one mid-level, one additional move here in free agency, what would be the most pertinent thing to do, and why does it maybe dictate something for the draft?
You're giving the listeners a peek behind the curtain. 99% of the time I get text from Adam that's like 6 words that I've never seen put together in a sentence, and I'm like, what does that mean? It's like hieroglyphics, a smoke signal. I'm trying to figure out what he's saying. So I still don't know what he said because I said, with a question mark, and then Adam never responded. So it's like, I got this weird code that I gotta,
4 to 7 hours later, I may address the thing that I had said to you. So the first thing, okay, before we clear the table here, in addition to the Leonard Williams contract, bringing back Austin Johnson, bringing in John Ross, the first move. So I'll set the table by saying I understand why when Giants fans see this as the first deal that the legal tampering period brings for Big Blue, I get why the fans react somewhat negatively. Very negatively. And that's Devontae Booker on the 2-year, $6 million deal. First year is $2.75 million. You can make your case if you want to say why, because I know it frustrated you. I know you don't like it. If you want to take it first, that's fine. But I can lay out exactly why this makes all the sense in the world and why the Giants fans shouldn't be thinking about it like, Jonathan Stewart, throw big money at a veteran running back. Like, I can shoot this thing down very easily if anyone wants me to, but I feel like you represent the voice of the fans on this one. So go ahead, take the floor with why this is such a disaster to commit less than $3 million this season to a veteran running back.
Okay, Big Blue Nation, I am your voice. I am on this podcast for you. This is why we do this show, because when I saw this signing, I went, what the hell is going on here? And I went onto Twitter, and everybody else was saying the exact same thing. So I knew that I felt the same way that everyone else did. And it's for a few reasons. Devontae Booker, 28 years old, kind of a journeyman running back. Fine. Okay. 2 years, not a long commitment. Okay, great. Saquon Barkley has been hurt. We need to invest a little bit of money in someone to be back there. The biggest problem with this is that we go out and we sign a backup running back to a 2-year, $6 million deal. We're giving a backup running back $3 million a year. Dave Gettleman loves setting the market early for how much a veteran running back is going to cost. And it drives me bananas. It drives me insane to think that we're spending money on that when we could be addressing it anywhere else. I wrote, Jameis Winston signed for $5.5 million, could get up to $10 or $12 million with the Saints. The Saints are in cap hell, and they found a way to get a starting quarterback for $2 million more than what we're paying a backup running back, which to me is just like frustrating.
Okay.
And the second piece is we've already invested a number 2 overall draft pick in Saquon Barkley. He is the guy that needs to be on the field 80% of the time for the Giants to be successful. We have shown last year, even when he gets hurt, Wayne Gallman making under $1 million. Alfred Morris picked up off the scrap heap. You can literally sign a veteran running back at any point that you want in this offseason, at any point. And Dave Gettleman goes out and says, I'm going to give $3 million to Devontae Booker with all this taking into account.
Let me go ahead and clear this up for everybody out there. First of all, as you mentioned it, right? You got Saquon Barkley coming off the injury, so it's important. But you need to understand that he is still going to potentially be dealing with his injury at the start of the year. So maybe the first couple of weeks are going to be timid. You're not going to want to overtax him. Want to have a guy you can count on behind him. You also, though, then have to consider how much was Cody Core making last year? Just curious.
Yeah, he was making two and a half.
Yeah, about two and a half. That's right. Guess what Devontae Booker also is? A special teams contributor. So now if you want to talk about dollars and cents about what you commit to the guy, you committed money to 2 positions. You got your backup running back that can come in and play, and you can also get a guy that can be a contributor in special teams. So you're doing 2 birds with 1 stone. You can split up however you want. $2 million here, $1 million there, $1.5 million on each. That would feel pretty good too. He's also a solid. Although, by the way, here he's also a solid blocker. He's also a solid receiving back out of the backfield. So when you talk about, and I think this is fair, I understand where Giants fans are coming from. They say, well, you picked up Alfred Morris off the scrap heap. You took a look at Freeman, who ends up getting hurt and going out the door. Wayne Gallman had a good year last year. That's great. But Wayne Gallman is what? A north and south runner. That is what he is. I like him, but that's what he is. He's a one-trick pony. Alfred Morris, listen, you got some value out of the legs. I think that guy is, far closer to the end than the beginning. He was out there to be picked up. Devontae Booker represents everything that you want. A solid backup with experience, had a good career and good time in Denver with the Denver Broncos, where he was in a crowded backfield, but bubbled up for nice performances. Looked good last year when Jacobs went down for the Vegas Raiders as well. So I just don't understand this reaction piece. And by the way, the last thing that I'll say, you go into the free agency market, and guess what you end up having to do if you don't do it early? If you identify Devontae Booker, you say, we really like him. He checks all these boxes for us. He's good value. If we wait and all of a sudden you're back in the scrap heap bargain bin shopping to back up Saquon Barkley coming off injury, you want to be back where we were last year, where you're pulling at strings and hoping something happens for you, it's just not worth the risk. So I understand the shell shock of past experiences with Dave Gettleman and these moves, but again, $3 million is nothing. It's nothing. We talked about it with Leonard Williams, right? What do you say? Listen, it's not our money. What are you worried about? 22, 24. Who cares? Get him on the team. We're not comparing apples to apples here with the value of a player, but $3 million is nothing on a cap for a New York Football Giants team that had an incredible need at this position behind Saquon Barkley. You're right. Saquon Barkley needs to be on the field 80, 85% of the time. And you also need to have someone that when you put him back there, you can ask him to do everything that you want a running back to be doing. Whatever level of play Booker is, he can do it in all phases, and he gives you the special teams help. So listen, I think that fans also, by the way, by the end of the day, were able to kind of settle in on that a little bit because they understood what was going, that, okay, now we got Leonard Williams back. It softened the blow. I think if it had happened in a different order, nobody would have batted an eyelash. It was just a little more aggressive because it was the first thing you heard for Giants, right? First thing Big Blue does, Devontae Booker. So, I get it. And also, I think everyone is going to really appreciate the value that this player is going to bring to this team in the upcoming year.
I can understand and appreciate that, special teams player, Joe Judge has an emphasis on that. I agree with a lot of the things you said. The order in which things happened was concerning for a couple reasons. One is we're not signing any big free agents because we don't have the cap space. That's what we're being told. Then we're watching Dalvin Tomlinson walk out the door. Why? Can't get Leonard Williams to sign a long-term deal. Dalvin Tomlinson's gone. So everyone's freaking out. We don't have the cap space. We need to create cap space. What's happening? And instead of creating that cap space, we spend it on a backup running back that we hope doesn't play very much this year. We hope that we don't see Booker on the field for more than 15%, 20% of the snaps, because that means that Saquon Barkley is out there performing for Giants. And the last thing I'll say is, listen, the reason why it frustrates me is you look at a site like Sporting News. They just put out like the top 20 running backs available. And Devontae Booker is number 18 on the list. And so we're like going out and we're being like, we got to pay that guy. Number 7 on the list is Jamal Williams, who's 25 years old, has over, his yards per carry is more than Devontae Booker. And he signs a 2-year, $7.5 million deal to basically potentially be the starter for the team. So like there's a couple of different wrinkles here where it's like, he's an older guy. He's not one of the top guys available on the market. We're running out of cap space. We haven't signed Leonard Williams. We're letting Dalvin Tomlinson walk out the door. And here we are throwing money early on in free agency to the number 18th ranked running back.
I get it. I do. I understand. It's not like it's beyond the pale to be frustrated by it. But even when you look at those things and you say, well, this is where he's in the hierarchy of best available running back, right? But we're not getting the best available running backs. We're talking about looking for a backup running back. So you take the top 12 or 13 of those guys off the list for the Giants, and then you work into it. We won't belabor it, although we are getting over as we went live here on YouTube. I love someone who has John Doe as their handle. But mentioning both him and also Josh, so shout out to both of you guys for getting involved in it, saying you are overpaying a little bit for the backup running back, but it's a quality backup running back, right? So it's a little bit. This isn't Jonathan Stewart. The transition is any. When you overall then look at where the Giants stand, we mentioned that Hunter Henry maybe was on the radar in free agency. They touched in on Floyd. This goes into the text message I sent you. I thought that once the Giants brought back Leonard Williams, you signed John Ross. The text I sent to you was the Giants are pretty close to saying they have to draft Slater at 11 if he's going to be available. And then you said, huh? And I gave you no information. The reason being is that when you look at the top of this draft and you say there's a lot of teams that need quarterbacks, the Jets, maybe the Atlanta Falcons, maybe, the Detroit Lions, depending on what their intentions are with Goff, et cetera. A lot of the Carolina Panthers, all these teams are in the mix for quarterbacks. A lot of these teams are also in the mix for offensive linemen. So if you create this value need for a lot of these teams, where do they all pick in the second round? Top of the second round, ahead of us. So if the Giants feel like offensive line, the guard replacing Zeitler is key here, they may have to consider very much going into that first round, and short of maybe Pitts falling, which feels like all indications are less and less likely that he's going to be there. He's getting reported as maybe the best player in the draft, period. So if he's not going to be there, maybe Waddle ends up being there. But even if you take Waddle at 11, you could find yourself in the second round looking at late second round, early third round offensive line talent to fill a last key hole on the roster. I do wonder what this is going to look like for the Giants. And when we talk about the last move you could make, maybe it is wide receiver, which would then eliminate that pressure there at 11. And it's difficult because my inclination was to say, well, you lost Dalvin Tomlinson. If you're going to add something else, it would be a Hassan Reddick, right? Bring him in to help with the edge rush. Or maybe you look at the crop of cornerbacks on the market and say, let's bolster what we have across from Bradbury and solidify that. Got weaker at defensive line. Let's get stronger in the secondary. And yet, if you can go get Golladay or get a big receiver, maybe you have to do that because the issues it's going to create. Just what's that general perspective look like for you right now? If there's one last move to make in free agency, what should it be for the Giants to set up the best possible draft?
Well, so I was the unpopular opinion that the Giants should go offensive line with their pick at 11, and it's not sexy. It's not. You're probably not going to go out and buy a first round guards jersey if you if he ends up getting drafted by the Giants. But you see all these teams that are successful from building from that offensive line because it just helps everybody on the field. That's Adam. That's where I'm struggling because I have concerns about Galladay's injury history, and paying him a boatload of money is concerning to me. I like Curtis Samuel. I think he could be an interesting addition. Don't know if I'm going to like him at the money that he ends up getting. So I do look at what kind of edge rush linebacker help can we get? If the market is down right now and we can lock in one of these guys to a 1-year prove-it deal or a 2-year team-friendly deal, we need to get some kind of pass rushing help because we haven't addressed that at all. We hope that some of our guys coming back like Lorenzo Carter will provide a little bit more pressure on the quarterback. What I think for me, ultimately, it comes down to what is the price of Golladay? Because all these agents and all these people are saying that the wide receiver market is the coldest positional market in the entire league right now, and that nobody is getting offers that they thought they were going to get. It's the reason why Golladay hasn't been signed. It's the reason Juju Smith-Schuster hasn't been signed. It's the reason Curtis Samuel hasn't signed yet. So if we're saying that all of a sudden the market is different on someone like Kenny Golladay and it goes from, man, we're going to have to pay him 18, 19 million to can we get him for 15 million? That changes how I perceive that. And I know we're talking about $2 or $3, $4 million. And we said sometimes that shouldn't matter on the player. But when you're talking about top end of the market, getting a wide receiver that you think could be a number one for 15 million is a much better offseason move for the Giants.
Yeah, and I think that to me, I was talking with Pizza Mike yesterday, pessimistic Mike, as some know, and just saying that I think the biggest holdup here is because it's been reported that most teams have concerns around the hip for Golladay. Golladay is the best wide receiver available on the market if he is healthy. So until Golladay falls, Smith-Schuster and Curtis Samuel and all these other guys, and think about veterans like A.J. Green, right, and T.Y. Hilton, like all of these guys are waiting. The entire wide receiver room is waiting for Golladay to go to set the market, and then everything's going to get hierarchy down from there. So I do wonder, what does that look like? And is there ever going to be a threshold here where teams, Giants or otherwise, just say, well, we are concerned and we're trying to get a value deal on Golladay, maybe a incentive, right? Play all 16 games, it bumps you up, all those kind of things, and get a better number. But if Golladay is steadfast that he turned down, a $18 million deal extension from the Lions, I don't know if there's a point where teams go, okay, fine, then we're going to look at Smith-Schuster. Okay, fine, then we're going to look at player X. The only difference here is he represents the very unique wide receiver that is the deep downfield threat and has the body and size, right? I mean, he's the unicorn on the market right now. All these other guys, and there's a lot of talent there, but none of them are that pure outside threat that Golladay represents.
Well, let me ask you a question. So we all know that everybody's pretty keen on Kenny Golladay if we can get him at the right price. It sounds like overwhelmingly Giant fans, would like to bring him in the building.
Sorry, let me real quick. Sorry, just because I had this thought. Would you do it on a big deal, on a big contract with the hip concern if they structured it in the way like Leonard Williams and gave a very friendly team number the first year? Would that move the needle for you at all? Or is it still just about the overall contract and the health?
I'm all about the overall contract with someone like Golladay. I want him. I'm not someone that wants him at all costs, so I'm a little bit more cautious because of the injury history with him. What my question is actually, the one person that I keep hearing Giant fans say, no matter what, absolutely not, is Juju Smith-Schuster, right? Like you hear most people say, we'd love Samuel at the right price. We'd love Golladay at the right price. I think we can end on this. What's your take on Juju? And if you don't like him, what is the number where all of a sudden you'd be like, well, like if we could get him for that changes my perception? Or are you completely out, even if he was a 1 year, $5 million a year receiver?
Yeah, it's weird. So, Smith-Schuster, it's like you almost forget he's only 24. He's the same age as Curtis Samuel. Might even be a little bit young. I mean, younger by, months or days, whatever it may be. These guys are basically same age entering free agency. Look at the numbers, 308 catches over the first 4 years of his career. Like, dude is talented. I forgot about the locker room stuff and the issue, some of those issues there ultimately in Pittsburgh that he had. That's probably the only concern, right? That's the only thing. Because I again, was just talking with people yesterday about this. Like, listen, if Golladay, all things being equal, I love Golladay. The health is a concern for me. Being 27, going to be 28 years old. I don't love that either. I love the idea of adding a 24, 25-year-old wide receiver that can grow with Daniel Jones and this offense. So I don't know. What I would say is, if the difference between Smith-Schuster and Curtis Samuel is $3 million a year, then maybe you love the character of Curtis Samuel and he can fit and he's kind of scratching the surface of what he could be. Maybe he's a late bloomer. Okay, that there's value there. But if the difference between Golladay and Smith-Schuster is $1 million, there's a world where I look at Smith-Schuster and say, okay, this is very versatile. You can move him around the field. You have to then look at Shepard in the same vein as inside, outside, slot, wherever on the field. He's talented. There's no denying that he is talented, and numbers to numbers, he's put up better numbers, though Golladay has missed games over the start of his career. He's put up better numbers over the first 4 years of his career. So it is interesting. It is interesting. He doesn't represent the same physical specimen that Golladay is, but he is an incredibly talented wide receiver.
What if I said to you, the Giants could sign up for Juju Smith-Schuster for 3 years, $39 million right now? Do you do the deal?
3 years, $39 million?
Yep.
Boy, it's so interesting when you think about where the market's been shifting. So I'm like, is that a great deal, or could it just be like kind of where it's on par with everything else? I would
13 million a year. 13 million a year for Juju Smith-Schuster. It seems like it's kind of a hedge because it's not number one money, but it's like a really good number two money. But it's a lot of money in this cap situation. So like, if he came to the Giants, was like, I'll move away from all their offers, 13 million a year. Do you do it?
You'd have to highly consider it. You'd have to be in for it, because especially if you think no matter what, some team Galladay's going to say, you got to pay me at least 17, 18 million, right? Like, I mean, like, even if it's coming down, like it's like Leonard Williams. I want the contract. I don't care what the market's saying. I want the contract that I want. Someone's going to pay me that, and someone will pay him that. I think Smith-Schuster can fall into a couple little concerns here, whatever. But yeah, if you 13 million, yeah, let's have some fun.
And the reason why 13 million is the number that we threw out, and we can get out of here on this one, is because Nelson Aguilar just signed a 2-year, $26 million deal with the Patriots. He is making $13 million a year. So the question is, like, if he's getting 13, how much is Smith-Schuster worth? How much is Samuel worth? And how concerned are you with the Golladay issues, right? All this is kind of in a vacuum, kind of nuts.
Right back at you then, though. If Smith-Schuster was available for 13 a year, what does that make? What would that make Curtis Samuel's contract?
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. What does it make Samuel? Is he 15 or 16? Does it make Golladay 17 or 18? Like, I don't know. I mean, maybe they think that Aguilar has turned it around, but to me, the wide receiver market is still the most fascinating piece of all of this, because a lot of the major players still have not dropped yet. The Giants are in on, at least we know, Kenny Golladay having some interest. They've talked about a little bit about Curtis Samuel, and who knows, Juju eventually would want to play in New York. We'll see.
Yeah. And listen, as we do start to head ourselves out the door, a shout out to John Doe and to Josh over there on YouTube. Thanks for joining in throughout. Corey Davis signed for about 13 million a year, right? So, these numbers are weird. Some players are getting different numbers that don't make sense relative to where we thought it was going to be. And then others are getting ones that seem spot on to the market as was predicted. So we'll see how it continues to fold out. I don't know what to anticipate as far as what's going to happen with the Giants before the draft. But you can follow us on social media, on YouTube at One Giant Podcast. You can, of course, download, rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get those podcast needs fulfilled. Leave us that 5-star rating if you're a friend of the show. You're family with us. And as Andy Makowitz wants, needs, and demands that the people know,
as always, let's go Big Blue.
Bang. See you next time, friends.